Isn't it great to be here? I was just feeling sympathy with my previous colleague, Professor Brazil. I have to keep checking that I haven't left my slippers on. or worse still, pyjama bottoms. But there you go. How exciting to be part of this launch day, and what an impressive collaboration you have here. One thing to say is that you have to make the cut somewhere with a talk, and so I'm not particularly emphasising our clinical collaborations, just to say that what we do, we cannot do without them. So to our primary, secondary care and hospice sector collaborators, they are absolutely invaluable. Also, I'm not specifically mentioning our patient public involvement. If you want to look at our website, hopefully you'll get an idea of how crucial and central we place them in our work. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our commissioners, our service commissioners, and working with the clinical commissioning groups. Well, of course, they don't exist anymore because we're in the usual NHS every 3 seconds, reorganise the whole deck chairs on the Titanic, but moving swiftly on. So the good, the bad and the ugly. Well, there you go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, really. I have to say I really quite enjoyed looking at this and preparing it, and realised part of the reason why I'm so chronically exhausted. So firstly, a little bit about us as a research centre. Then I thought I'd just tell you a bit about my personal journey because, in the words of Notting Hill, I'm just a girl standing in front of a bunch of people. I mean, I won't go as far as to say I love you all, but you kind of get the kind of gist. And a little bit about growing and sustainability, but also the cross-cutting theme throughout it all is the importance of mentors, collaborators, and accountability. I always remember talking to a consultant paediatrician once, and they said, just as you start thinking and believing that you're really somebody, some child wheezes on you. And I think having your accountability people around you to stop you kind of disappearing up your own proverbial is a really, really important thing. So who are we? Well, we're researchers, healthcare and social care professionals from a range of disciplines, patients, families and members of the public. From our annual report, 21-22 gives you a snapshot of who we are. So 5 senior academics, 17 research fellows, associates, assistants, some administrative staff, woefully inadequate. My goodness, they are so important. Capacity building, this is something to really, really emphasise. We've already alluded a bit to the importance of the pipeline. What we do has to be carried on into the future. It cannot rest on the heads of those of us, I'm starting to feel incredibly long in the tooth now. It cannot rest on my shoulders. We have to build people up to take over and do it. In fact, my hot off the press news is that I'm taking this really seriously, and I've just handed the directorship over to Fliss Murtagh. Pause to do dance. So postgraduate students, clinical academic training posts. I don't know that you have this system here in Ireland, but we are lucky in England that we have clinical academic training with some dedicated research time in early stage careers and a bit higher in more senior trainees. We still have the bottleneck trying to get them to senior lecturer, but that's another story. Medical students, interns, elective students. These are really, really important people to support. Firstly, they're not slouches. You don't get to be a medical student by being a slouch, but you might need to give them a little bit of extra help. They're real novices in this, but this is how we grow our pipeline. Research grants, so we're now bringing in we brought in over 10 million in research. Well, we didn't bring that all into the university, but we were part of about 10 million of research grant funds. 87 peer review outputs, conference presentations, etc. You get the idea. You can have a look at our report if you want more detail. So this is from our lovely away day, and isn't it just? They're like family, really. I do get a bit maternal about them all, but anyway, move on that one. Otherwise, that gets a bit embarrassing, doesn't it? Really. Board of directors. This touches on the accountability. There has to be, so you can't just sort of fluff about where you end up. So either as a scattergun, researching all sorts of stuff, or you start believing in your own greatness. You've got to have people who are going to tell you how it is and have that wisdom. So we have our senior academics. We also have medical school representation. This is so important because you have to make your mark within your institution. If they don't know what you're doing, you need to have it right up in their face to say, look, this is what we're doing. And we've been so lucky in that we've had an enormous support from senior level at our medical school. And we also have elected representatives. We also, again on the theory of accountability, have this incredible group of critical friends from around the world, people who generously give their time, who are at the top of their game, who come together twice a year to reflect on what we're doing, to challenge us, to encourage us, as I say, from the goodness of their heart. They are a multidisciplinary group from all sorts of ranges and walks of life. So my personal journey, well, I was actually incredibly slow realising I was an academic anyway. It sort of came upon me as a bit of a surprise, although looking back, I was always that annoying houseman, because we were housemen in those days, always asking, "Sir, why are we doing this? Sir, have you seen this paper? Sir, don't you think we should be doing it?" It was always "Sir." There we go. And then as time, I was already working with others. So, Richard Lehman, who was one of the first people to really start shouting about the importance of palliative care and heart failure, wrote me in to co-edit his book, which turned out to be the first book on practical handbook on this subject. I just said yes, because I thought it was a really, really good idea. I didn't kind of think, this is a big game plan of my big career. Lung cancer clinicians, I was already working with our lung cancer clinicians in Hull, working on their breathlessness service. And I said, we really need to get some funding to evaluate this properly. We should be doing a trial on this. Simon Noble, well, what can I say? Those of you who know Simon Noble, who really took the mantle on about venous thromboembolism from Cardiff, a huge, huge collaborator, already working with him, already working with the cardiologist as a registrar in Glasgow, because I thought it would be a really, really good idea to do a morphine placebo clinical trial as a registrar. No one kind of told me that was supposed to be difficult. So it's amazing. Can I just, one of my best tips, top tip, is kind of don't assume, just assume everything can be done. And when someone tells you it's difficult, just go, let's have a go. Actually, interesting, I was looking at the cost of this trial. Okay, it was across over 10 patients. It cost me £178. Bearing in mind our 158 Mabel trial, which is costing nearly 1.5 million, you can see how the costs of research have completely escalated in 25 years. That's another talk in itself. And then Sarah Booth. Any of you heard of Sarah Booth? Massive in breathlessness research. A clinician set up and worked from scratch using the MRC complex framework for complex service intervention in Cambridge with the Cambridge Breathlessness Intervention Service, really got the whole thing going, did the pivotal early studies about oxygen versus placebo in breathlessness. What an incredible woman, as mainly a clinician, a wife, a mother of kids. She bumped into me, this is one of these serendipity stories, AIIHPC, Berlin, 2004. I'd published that first CPINT. And she said, why don't you join the National Cancer Research Institute Breathlessness Research Group? And for me, her saying that to me gave me permission to think, well, maybe I could do this because she's somebody like me. And so touching on mentors, role models in research is incredibly, incredibly important. And if, can I have a real shout out to women here? Don't be afraid to step up, because if people don't see you there, I, for years, didn't think of myself as an academic because I didn't think I could do that. The only academics I could see were people completely different to me. So people like us is really important. And through that Breathlessness International Research Group, I met and started to work with the most incredibly generous collaborators. David Currow, Amy Abernethy, who revolutionised the landscape, particularly in breathlessness research, and David then became my second main mentor alongside Sarah. Irene Higginson, got to give her a shout out for the work that she has done. She has really put research on palliative care in the landscape. Morag Farquhar, Claudia Balswein, these people do incredibly good breathlessness research. And of course Simon, in terms of the venous thromboembolism strand that I had. So growing, the importance of academic infrastructure. And although quite a bit of what I did on top of the day job as a clinician, there comes a point where you kind of have to start clocking and thinking, actually, this is the animal I am. I can no longer deny that I am that annoying person who asks why, and I really, really want to do something about it. So I was just starting to think, oh, I'm going to have to move from my nice little place where I live in Scarborough, as in Scarborough Fair, and go to a big city centre of excellence. And then the Hull York Medical School plopped into my back garden. And I had a phone call from the dean and said, if there was a post going, would you apply for it? Well, of course, yes. So the first academic appointment in 2006 was a game changer for me. All of a sudden, I had 50% of my week was dedicated to research. I cannot tell you what a difference that makes. And again, if there are any health service commissioners here, please have that vision to prioritise clinicians who have dedicated research time, because it revolutionises your service, it revolutionises what they can do. Infrastructure, colleagues, amazing. There was no department of palliative care, but I thought, well, it was me and a PhD clinical fellow, let's see what we can do. So there are lots of internal connections to do, and you use what was there. And continuing to publish, present, and build external connections. The 3 Ps, basically, I think sums up the last however many years of my life, is publish, present, and apply for funding. English is my first language, but you've got to give me that one. Infrastructure, the Research Funding Support Office. Oh, my days. Someone introduced me to them, and I'd spent 3 weeks frantically trying to work out the costs for staff for a grant I was doing, and they just said, work with so-and-so, and they just went diddly-diddly-dee on a computer, spat it out. I kind of laid down in a dark room for 24 hours and sent them a bunch of roses. The legal office, we moan about them all being slow, but my goodness, what would we do without them? The library. What can I say? Admin support. Colleagues. I had clinical decision-making experts. I had patient safety experts. I had applied social scientists and qualitative researchers. Statistics. Oh my goodness, Martin Bland, what a babe. He was so patient with me and sat through and worked with my data, and he didn't make me feel like an imposition. He said, look, I need the clinical academic meaning in all this. And I could probably now, when I'm reviewing papers, I would never say I was a statistician, but I kind of have this rule of thumb. What would Martin Bland have done here? Respiratory cardiac clinical academics. Had an interesting dance with the cardiac ones to start with, but, we got there. Oncology clinical academics, systematic reviewers, trials unit. Growing breathlessness research then, just as a bit of an example. So 2006, because I'd already been working with the clinical collaborators in our oncology trust, we'd already put in one of the, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the SUPAC small grants that the NCRI were doing. It's often those small grants that you look back and you think, oh my goodness, that was a game changer for me. So never underestimate the value of that beginning small grant. Non-pharmacological management of breathlessness, an RCT, different intensity training. It was 1 week versus 3 weeks, and we did it in a single site feasibility study. That led on to a phase 3 funded study, much bigger grant, and that actually showed that 1 session for lung cancer patients was just as good as 3. So at a fell swoop, we have tripled our throughput through that service. At the same time, again, use the internal pots of money wisely as well. They're becoming less frequent because everyone's tightening their belts a bit. But if they're there, go for them. But make them work. So we did some mechanistic work, working with our neuroimaging colleagues to look at breathlessness, what was happening in people's brains when they got breathless and then recovered from breathlessness with or without fan air across their face. We also then did a feasibility study, one of our first studies working with our Australian colleagues, so a 2-country feasibility study looking at the fan activity and breathlessness. And at the same time, we were growing these international collaborations in this field with Australia, Netherlands, and Sweden. We were starting then to do also with that collaboration population data studies, so using what was already there, doing secondary data analysis, grant writing like fury. One of the things that, working with David Currow is that, conferences were exhausting because by the end of the first day, you'd written 3 grant applications and 5 papers. I'm thinking, whatever he's on, I need to have some PhD student projects. Again, all the time you've got these different strands of work going on as you're building this program. And then 2014, we got two of our both, an Australian and UK collaborative, different funding pots, different studies. So the BEAMS trial in NHMRC, and one of the reasons I've been so busy this morning is that the report of that has come out in JAMA. So there's a tweet thread about that if you're interested. And then the British Heart Foundation over here, we got this the trial funded for heart failure. And so on, and it became exponential. Growing again. So again, whilst external funding usually will fund vital postdoctoral researchers, never poo-poo the internal funding and unfunded work. The trouble with unfunded work is that it's blooming hard work, because it's got to be done in and around on top of the day job, and it can be really, really hard to keep that momentum going and to make it happen. But it's really important, particularly getting that preliminary work done, building collaborations, so then you've got a really solid case to go in and get the big money. Don't forget undergraduate students, university interns, clinical academic trainees. These are hungry people who are really keen to work with you, but factor in that they are also people who are really inexperienced. They don't know what they're doing, but they learn very, very quickly. And occasionally you get one that you think, gosh, how did they get into med school? But thankfully, rarely, I would say. Scratch a little bit and then you find someone who is absolutely up for working hard. And on a different tack, don't forget to give back. I have received so much from people's expertise freely on data monitoring committees, study steering committees, really valuable things, stakeholder stuff, grant review panels, grant reviews, journal reviews, task forces. We've just finished this incredible task force with the European Respiratory Society about palliative care and respiratory disease, out to review now, so hopefully watch this space. Huge piece of work and an incredible collaborative piece of work, but this is all basically people giving for free. So being prepared to be part of that, I think, is a really important part of building your research program. This is just a snapshot. So this was our fun study where we got really breathless people. We stuck them in a thing that looked a bit like a Marge Simpson hairdryer, made them wiggle around with an exercise band in the chair actually a couple of them I had to beg to stop because I thought they were going to die on me, and then scanned their brains as they recovered. We did it twice and then randomly allocated a recovery with or without cool facial air. And all I want you to take home from this is that from the blobs, you'll see that it's actually different recovering with cool facial air. The perception has changed. These are alpha waves. Alpha waves is our selective shut down what we don't want to notice, so that we can focus on something we do want to notice. And the thoughts around this is that actually we're doing sensory refocusing, a little bit like a kind of neural respiratory gait. And the upshot is, as Capistine-Morlo-Panzini's group described it as, fooling the brain, that you're breathing more than you really are. So, work with your basic science collaborators to start working the story right from basic science right up to the population level. No funding. This is just a couple of examples. So Simon Noble and I did the systematic review and meta-analysis, got it into Lancet Oncology, and it's formed the basis of a number of clinical guidelines and subsequent funding. So never poo-poo the unfunded work. One just published recently by one of my postdoc researchers who's developing a whole stream around global palliative care with it. It's a new stream of work for us. Using routinely collected data, working with the Inspire program, medical students, and other people. Good publication. Working, again, with students and clinical academic trainees. Tilly did a really nice pooled data study from a couple of trials we had, using data we had already. And then Fran Birch, a medical student, did this, just a service improvement project, just did the number crunching for a whole pile of stuff we'd collected as we went along with our subcutaneous furosemide use. And it gets it out there, and they're really keen, and they're thrilled to bits to get a publication. We've got that work out there, and it's often then taken to be the next stepping stone. So sustainability, number one, hand over directorship as soon as you think you possibly can. Oh, I can't tell you how many boring meetings she now has to go to. But it's making the case for more resources, and I think this is the biggest challenge for all of us starting to build a research program within a higher education institute, because you are competing for a bit of the cake with the real big boys and girls, with the big lab science people, with the big hitters, and you've got to try and, I mean, you know, applied clinical health research is not exactly you know, the biggest fish in the pond. And so you've really got to make the case as to why that's important. And it comes down to income outcomes. And where we are, it's the research excellence framework. I don't know what kind of priorities, pressures you have here, but that really, really speaks. That is what gets the government funding coming into the university. And if you can demonstrate that you are doing that well for your university, they are going to like you one heck of a lot more. Become completely indispensable. Not just you, but other people in your line management. My long-term gain is to get the people that I kind of talent spot and just give them the opportunities so that they become indispensable, so I can just bang away to say, we cannot afford for this person to leave. Work with the dean, others. Aim high and read current priorities. So, for example, I'll just give you an example of the Wolfson Foundation grant that made the Wolfson Palliative Care Research Centre official in 2016. So the context was a big infrastructure investment in the University of Hull. We had a new health building, so we're training for a range of degrees. The clinical trials unit at Hull was starting up, a methodology hub with resources going into stats, epidemiology, mixed methods, information, you name it, and applied health research groups. The dean at the time absolutely supported the creation of an institute of applied health research, and the palliative care research group was seen as a strength because we were bringing in money, we were getting returnable outputs, and we were making a noise. Well, so we were therefore supported by the University of Hull to apply to the Wolfson, because it's one of those things that you can only apply through your university, and we got £500,000 capital award to set that up. And that then freed up the money for them to say, in that case, we'll give you a commitment to fund a second professor, a senior lecturer, and a postdoctoral researcher. So part of it is serendipity, but there's also, you've got to read those runes and grab those opportunities and not be shy and know who your allies are and work with them in a pretty, you know, a bit like a hostage negotiator. Don't take no for an answer too easily and just sort of roll over. And the trouble with palliative care, we're so quick to go, oh, I'm so terribly sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. No, we've got something to offer that is crucially important, and look at the population challenges coming up. You need us. The other big thing that helped the university really like us was that we said to them, well, they had an internal competition as to which group they will put forward for the UKRI's International Investment Initiative. And because we had been collaborating so strongly over the years with Australia, we were in an incredibly strong position then to put in for this 5-year, basically exchange program, joint work in education, grant applications and publications. And we were successful, only one of 8 awards nationwide in any discipline. So don't be afraid to go for it. Don't be afraid to sit and think, well, actually, we could do that. Don't think, oh, no, we're not big enough, or we're not there yet, or what, you know. Just go for it. So the ugly. Because I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, I've kind of summarised it all in one slide, because that's just kind of the way I am, really. Save it all on one slide, look at it every now and again, have a cry, and then pick up the pieces and go back to the happy slides again. Rejection. Oh, I am really good at rejection now. And I think what I've learned over the years is to take a step back and think, right, okay, is this person is just an idiot? You know, they've absolutely no idea. Or sour grapes, or what are they talking about? That's not my bag, that's theirs. Or is it actually, now looky here, they've got a really, really good idea, and thank goodness they spotted that before the paper was published. Or thank goodness they've raised that at a time when actually we can address that in the peer review before the final, you know. It's being really crystal clear, what is your bag and what is not your bag, and being genuinely grateful often for people who, out of the goodness of their heart, have given up their time without being paid to critique your work. The downside, of course, is that some people really need to go on a course on how to do critique. I've now completed my counselling and I'm all right. Just twitching a bit every now and again. Failed projects. Oh, What can I tell you about the home oxygen trial? The Breathe More, so the British Heart Foundation trial, pulled early due to slow recruitment. Actually, the HOT trial was pulled because patients were supposed to either have 15 hours of long-term oxygen therapy or not, and the long-term oxygen therapy lot, basically nobody used it, so it was pulled because of poor adherence. I would say as an aside, these are both heart failure trials, and I think it is incredibly difficult to do symptom trials in this specialty, because that is not their culture or focus. But yet, to get those patients, you need to work and collaborate with the heart failure community. So, Tracy, good luck. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Do not give up. Teamwork can be challenging, can't it? Because the trouble is, research is a team sport. You can't do it properly on your own. And having that kind of knowledge of who you are, and I tend to do a bit of a weather check on myself in the morning. I am a self-confessed INTJ, if that means anything to you. Actually, interesting, when I do it as a clinician, I come out as INFJ, which means I've learned how to fake it for people that I really care. But when it comes down to it, the hard-boiled egg is actually, it's all about the science. But that I bit and the N bit means that when I am tired, I find it incredibly difficult to suffer fools gladly. So it's about self-knowledge and learning to value what other people bring and having that humility to say, actually, I need them. They bring something really, really valuable, and we will find a way to work together. And most people you can. There's always the one, isn't it? And, I freely acknowledge that some people find me intensely irritating. I'm okay with that. Expectations of professional academia, juggling large numbers of projects and people, quite frankly, I really don't think is doable. I genuinely do not think my job is doable. So, I just put that out there. I do because I'm compelled to do it, but it's got to be like a disease with you. It's got to be like an addiction. So it would be lovely to live in a world where it was funded properly, where you actually had time to do what you wanted to do. I need to be cloned into 3 people, and then we will be grand. And then the last ugly is the glacial pace of implementation into clinical practice. I've been, around for years. I think I started that work in heart failure in the 90s. And it is only now starting to be integrated, really meaningfully. There are lots of pockets of good practice, but it's really only now starting to get momentum. Respiratory, I would say, are ahead of the game. I think there's more of a cultural awareness that palliative care is part of what they do. Parkinson's disease care. So one of the greatest delights of my life was being on the founder board, one of the founder board members of the International Neuro Palliative Care Society. If you've never looked them up, look them up. They're doing great stuff. But we've still got a heck of a long way to go. So mentors, collaborators, and accountability. Oh, I'm going around in circles now. Right. I'd say mentors are crucial. They encourage you, they provide opportunities. You learn skills. I've learned skills that just because David assumed I was going to do it, And David doesn't take, I can't do it, you just do. Complex interventions, particularly from Sarah. Wisdom, that step outside wisdom, someone eyeballing what you're doing from outside, not caught up in the middle of it yourself, a sounding board and a critical friend that you can trust. Solid strategic advice. We set up the board and external advisory committee and set strategic objectives directly because David said, if you don't, you're going to drown. Create a strong senior team. Here are these beauties in our team. So Fliss, who is now the director, Jonathan Kaufman, that we unashamedly poached from King's, bless them, very generous. Mark Pearson, if you haven't clocked him, reader in implementation science with a special interest in palliative care. He has revolutionised our work, completely revolutionised our work. And Liz Walker is Professor of Social Work, who really brings a great interdisciplinary aspect to what we do. They run their own programme, they support each other's, we share the line management, supervision and other collegiate activities. It gives us a critical mass. They're people who will tell you when you're being silly or have lost the plot. They're people who are up when you're down and vice versa. They're people with you working to a common goal and you can have a good laugh. Really important. Accountability is needed at all levels. Strong appraisal performance review needs to be embedded for all of us. And the team ethos needs to include celebration of small and big things. The strategic research objectives stops us chasing after lots of different money pots and just having a range of feasibility studies, but we can actually bring things to implementable right through to clinical practice. Regular senior review of these objectives. Hearing, taking and acting on external advice, even if it's kind of difficult to hear. Personal mentorship, and having, even though I actually wouldn't say I had a work-life balance at all, having those personal friends and family who keep you straight. And just to end up, we're now collaborating around the world, but it's taken time to do it. And so my summary is start somewhere with what you've got. Publish, present. That's just to show I do know how to spell apply for funding. Collaborate. Seek out and use mentorship. And I would say neither of my mentors would say they're mentors. It's all been informal, but that's what they've done for me. And sadly, Sarah, I don't know if you know, she just died recently, and what a legacy she has left behind at her funeral. The numbers of people there working in the field of palliative care in breathlessness because of Sarah. The sustainability has to be beyond individual personalities. It has to keep going. It can't just be a bright light that shines. It has to be something that embeds, roots, and carries on. And we need these strong research centres around so that funders say, hey, this is a thing that's worth funding. Look, there's all these strong research centres. Build, value, and support the team. So it's been so lovely to thank you for having me. Let me have a rant. Thank you.
Many thanks, Miriam, and we were delighted just as the... Oh, no, stay. And we were delighted to work with your colleague Mark on the implementation science event we ran the other year, or last year, was it? So has anyone...
just to say, he is taking applications for his module, if you're interested, all online. Revolutionise your life.
Has anyone got any questions for Miriam? More?
I don't think I need a microphone. I'm just wondering, you were saying the 3 Ps, publish, present, apply for funding, which are all very, I suppose, academic based. So where does that sit then with the concept of collaborating with the deliverers, let's say, of services, and actually really trying to translate? How much responsibility do you think the academic community have for that?
Right, well, that's a good question, and one of the things I couldn't fit into this, so thank you. So just to give a couple of examples, we've got a new NIHR-funded palliative care network starting up in the Yorkshire region, and as part of that, we're funding some backfill time for clinicians to start to grow up their ideas and to bring them in, recognising that they need some time. That's just one small example, recognising that issue. Number 2 is work within the structures that we've got. So we've got the clinical research network, so make sure we're at the table in terms of accessing infrastructure funding to support clinicians to do that. The pipeline of the medical students, the academic clinical trainees, and working with your commissioners. So one of the most impressive projects I think that FLIS has been doing has been working with the whole clinical commissioning group, where they have funded a service evaluation of a new integrated frailty older adult community service. And the importance of the academics there was that what we added to that was that the commissioners, and I'm going to make a generalisation here because I'm sure this is different for different commissioners, are often very interested in process outcomes. How many people got this? How many people had that? We said, let's add patient report outcomes. Let's look to see, and so we embedded the integrated palliative care outcome scale, and what we found, actually, this improved at 1 month and was sustained at 3 in the group that got the care. So, and that's something that we brought to that table, and I think the academics bring rigour to that table, particularly in terms of quality improvement and service improvement. And I think the challenge is that the two cultures often are poorly aligned, because in academia we're like the tortoise. We plod our way from basic science to the feasibility, to the early testing. We might eventually get round to a phase 3 and perhaps some implementation work, whereas the NHS wants it now and they want to roll it out. I would say that there needs to be a happy, sweet middle, because rolling stuff out too early leads to things falling on their face. We only just have to say LCP gate for people to know what I'm talking about. So I think there is a really important synergy there, and I think academia brings something very important in terms of rigour and robustness, and also just kind of bringing in that. Have you thought about, sometimes we go to them, sometimes they come to us, but it's got to be a trusting relationship build up over time. So really important, and thank you for bringing that up.